The most audacious moment in Luanda, 1641, began when Nzinga stepped from a reed canoe to meet a Dutch officer on the riverbank, not as a conquered subject, but as a conspirator. This is the true story of a calculated reversal, an African queen and a European trading company who, for a brief and violent moment, joined forces to challenge Portugal's control over one of the most brutal systems in history. To understand the conspiracy, you have to see both the map and the motive. By the early 1600s, the Portuguese had transformed Luanda into a fortified center of the Atlantic slave trade. Founded in 1576, the colony became a key nukta linking inland raids to overseas plantations. Expeditions pushed deep into Ndongo and Mbundu lands, capturing thousands. Governors, missionaries, and private traders built a system held together by alliances, coercion, and betrayal, all feeding a growing demand across the Atlantic. And into this system stepped Nzinga. Born around 1583, she was the sister of a king of Ndongo. In 1622, she was baptized as Dona Ana de Souza, but she was never a submissive figure. Nzinga ruled with a rare combination of political intelligence and calculated ruthlessness. In one famous negotiation, when the Portuguese denied her a chair, she ordered a servant to kneel and used them as her seat. A silent but powerful statement of equality. She understood something many rulers did not. Power was not just force, it was perception. She fought when necessary, negotiated when useful, and adapted when survival demanded it. But even Nzinga faced a problem she could not solve alone. Portugal's hold was too strong. That's where the second player enters the story, the Dutch West India Company. Founded in 1621, the company had one clear goal: break Iberian dominance and control the flow of sugar and enslaved labor to the Americas, especially Dutch Brazil. Luanda was the key. Whoever controlled it controlled supply. But the Dutch had a weakness. They lacked local alliances, and Nzinga had what they needed. What followed was not a simple alliance, but something closer to a conspiracy. The agreement was strategic and quiet. Nzinga needed weapons, recognition, and a way to weaken Portuguese control. The Dutch needed a steady supply network and local support. Through envoys and intermediaries, negotiations took place in secret. Along riverbanks, through letters, and via African middlemen who understood both worlds. The terms were simple: support each other, and reshape the balance of power. In August 1641, the plan moved into action. Dutch ships appeared off the coast of Luanda. Local groups, long resentful of Portuguese demands, began to shift sides. The Portuguese garrison, already weakened by poor supply lines and internal corruption, struggled to respond. Then, the city fell. For 7 years, Luanda was no longer Portuguese. The Dutch controlled the coast. Nzinga strengthened her position inland, consolidating power and expanding Matamba into a more centralized state. For a moment, the balance had shifted, but conspiracies, especially those tied to empires, rarely last. In 1640, Portugal had regained independence from Spain. With renewed focus, they prepared to reclaim what they had lost. In 1648, a counter-expedition led by Salvador de Sá arrived from Brazil. The Dutch forces were pushed out. Luanda was retaken, and the brief alliance collapsed. What followed was not a return to normal, but an escalation. The slave trade intensified. Systems became more organized, more efficient, and more devastating. Nzinga's alliance had bought her time. Time to rebuild, to strengthen, and to resist. But it had also tied her fate to European conflicts far beyond her control. She continued to fight for decades, shifting between diplomacy and warfare, adapting again and again until her death in 1663. Her legacy remains complex. To some, she was a resistor of colonial power. To others, a pragmatic ruler navigating impossible choices. But one thing is undeniable. She understood the system and used it. Today, historians view the events of 1641 as more than a military episode. It was a deliberate design, a moment where an African ruler and a European corporation aligned their interests to reshape trade, power, and survival. A conspiracy written not just in plans and promises, but in consequences. Because in the end, the real story is not just about who won or lost. It's about what happens when power is negotiated in a world built on exploitation. Nzinga's story reminds us of something deeper. Even within systems designed to dominate, there are those who learn to maneuver, to adapt, and for a moment to turn the game in their favor. But those moments are often temporary, and their cost is rarely small.